This girl was thrown out at just 16 with nothing. No food, no shelter, and no one to help her. Everyone thought she would freeze to death before sunrise. But what she did next shocked everyone. She built a house from nothing, just dirt and grass. And somehow in the middle of a brutal winter, that house stayed warm while everything outside turned to ice. This is not just a survival story. This is the story of how rejection turned into power. The wind cut through the valley like a blade, and the sky hung low and grey as if it, too, had given up on warmth that winter morning when Sorella stood barefoot on the frozen dirt outside the only house she had ever known, her hands trembling not from the cold alone, but from the finality in her mother's voice behind her. The door slammed shut with a hollow sound that echoed louder than thunder in her chest. She was 16 and already erased. No bag, no food, no apology, just the silence of rejection. Sorella did not cry, not because she was strong, but because something inside her had frozen harder than the ground beneath. Her feet, she stared at the horizon, where pale sunlight struggled through clouds, and made a quiet decision. She would not beg. She would not return. She would not break. The village behind her whispered stories before she had even taken 10 steps. They said she was stubborn. They said she was cursed. They said she would be back by nightfall. They were wrong. She walked until the houses disappeared and the land opened into wild, untamed stretches of earth, where no one cared who she was or where she came from. Only the wind spoke here, and it spoke in harsh, endless tones. By sunset, her feet were numb and her stomach clawed at her insides. She found shelter beneath a broken fence and wrapped her arms around herself, whispering to no one that she would survive. The first night was the longest night of her life. The cold pressed against her ribs like it wanted to crush her lungs. Every breath burned, and every moment stretched into eternity. But she did not move, she did not scream, she endured. Morning came slowly, dragging light across the land and revealing her. New reality, empty land, endless sky, and no one coming to save her. Sorella stood again, weaker but unbroken. She began walking, not toward anything but away from everything she had lost. Hours passed, and her body screamed for rest until she found it, a patch of earth near a shallow slope where the soil looked darker, thicker, stronger. Something in her mind sparked not hope but possibility. She remembered stories whispered by old farmers about earth houses, homes built from the land itself, warm in winter, cool in summer, hidden yet alive. She had never believed them fully, but now belief was not required, only action. Her hands began to dig. The soil was frozen hard as stone, and every movement tore at her fingers, but she kept going, scraping, clawing, pushing through pain, because stopping meant freezing, and freezing meant ending. By midday, her nails were cracked, bleeding, but she had carved a shallow hollow into the earth. She crawled inside, pressing her body against the soil, and felt something incredible. The wind was quieter, the cold less vicious. The earth held a softness, a quiet resistance against the freezing air. For the first time since she had been thrown out, she felt a flicker of control. That night she did not sleep in the open sky. She slept inside the beginnings of something, her breath warming the small space, her body sharing heat with the ground, and though she shivered, she did not feel like she was dying. Days turned into a relentless cycle of digging, gathering, and learning. She used broken branches for support, dragged stones with shaking arms, and shaped the soil with desperate determination. She did not have tools, she did not have guidance, only instinct and memory, and a refusal to disappear. Her body grew stronger, her mind sharper. She studied the wind, the sun. The way frost settled and melted, she adapted, shaping her shelter deeper, wider, stronger, pressing mud into walls, packing grass into gaps, sealing her fragile creation with the only resources she had. Hunger became a constant companion, but so did resilience. She found roots, berries, anything that would keep her moving. She drank from a narrow stream and whispered gratitude to the land that had not rejected her like people had. Weeks passed, and the hollow became a structure, Not a house, not yet, but something that held life inside it. Something that resisted winter, something that answered her. Effort with quiet protection. She worked, even when her muscles screamed, even when her vision blurred, even when doubt crept in like a shadow, whispering that she was only delaying the inevitable. But every night when she curled inside, her growing shelter and felt the air inside, slightly warmer, slightly softer, she knew. She was building more than survival. She was building defiance. One evening, as snow began to fall heavy and relentless, she stepped back and looked at what she had created, a low-rounded structure formed from packed earth, reinforced with branches and sealed with frozen mud. It was crude, imperfect, fragile, yet real. It was hers. She crawled inside as the storm roared outside. The wind howled like a beast searching for weakness, but inside something extraordinary happened. The air did not freeze her breath. Lingered warmth gathered slowly. Held by the thick earth around her, she pressed her hands against the walls and felt life in them. She smiled for the first time since she had been thrown out. Not a soft smile, not a hopeful one, but a fierce, quiet smile of someone who had chosen to live and was beginning to win. That night the storm raged harder than any before. Snow buried the land, erased tracks, silenced everything, but inside her small sod shelter, Sorella stayed alive, and somewhere deep inside her a fire had begun to grow. Winter deepened and the world outside turned into a frozen desert of white silence, where even the wind seemed sharper, colder, more determined to strip life from anything that dared exist. But inside the small earthen shelter, Sorella had built something impossible was happening. She was warm, not comfortably warm, not like a fire-lit home, but warm enough to breathe, without pain, warm enough to sleep, without fear of not waking warm, enough to think beyond survival. She noticed it slowly at first, how the air inside her shelter held steady, how the walls absorbed the cold and softened it, how her own body heat stayed trapped within the earth around her, as if the ground itself had decided to protect her. She began to measure it, not with tools, but with feeling. Each morning she would step outside and the cold would hit her like a hammer, stealing her breath, instantly freezing her skin. But when she crawled back inside, the difference was undeniable. It was as if she had stepped into another world. She did not know numbers, she did not know science, but she knew this her shelter worked, and that knowledge changed everything. She was no longer just surviving, she was building something powerful, something rare, something no one had taught her yet. She had created with her own hands. Days became purposeful. She improved the structure, thickening the walls, adding layers of soil and grass, sealing cracks, reinforcing the roof with branches packed tightly together. She shaped a small entrance angled against the wind, minimizing the cold air that could enter. Each improvement made a difference. Each change turned her shelter from fragile refuge into something closer to a home. Hunger still haunted her, but she had learned the land. She found small animals, set crude traps, gathered what little winter offered, and rationed everything with discipline far beyond her years. She was no longer the girl who had been thrown out. She was becoming something else, something sharper, stronger, something the world had not expected. One morning, as the sky cleared into a pale, cold blue, she stepped outside and noticed something unusual. Smoke in the distance, thin and uncertain, rising from far beyond the ridge. People. Her heart pounded, not with excitement, but caution. She had learned quickly that people did not always mean safety. She watched for hours, hidden near her shelter, studying the distant movement, until finally she made a decision not to approach, not to reveal herself, not yet. Instead, she returned to her work, because for the first time in her life, she had something that was truly hers, something no one could take unless she allowed it. Weeks later, the cold reached its peak, the kind of cold that killed quietly, that crept into bones, and ended stories without warning. But inside her sod house, something extraordinary held steady. The warmth remained. It was not magic, it was not luck, it was design instinct. Effort and resilience combined into something real. The thick earth walls trapped heat. The low ceiling preserved it. The narrow entrance protected it, and her presence fueled it. If someone had measured it, they would have found something unbelievable, that inside her. Rough $200 creation. The temperature stayed near 64 degrees, while outside the world froze. But Sorella did not need numbers to understand what she had achieved. She felt it every time she survived another night. One afternoon, as she gathered wood, she heard footsteps behind her, quick, cautious human footsteps. She turned slowly and saw him, a traveler named Orvan, wrapped in worn cloth, his face marked by cold and exhaustion. He stared at her as if she were something impossible. A girl alone, alive in the dead of winter? He asked where she lived, and she said nothing, only gestured toward the land. He followed, uncertain, curious, until she led him to the small sod structure half hidden in the earth. When he stepped inside, his expression changed from doubt to disbelief. Warm, he touched the walls, sat on the ground, breathed deeply. As if rediscovering life itself, he asked how she had done it, who had taught her, where she had learned. She answered simply, no one. He stayed that night, then another, and word began to spread, quietly, carefully, about a girl who had built a home from nothing, a place where winter could not kill you, a place that held warmth when the world offered none. More people came, not many, but enough to change everything. Broken travelers, lost workers, forgotten. Souls, each one arriving with the same disbelief and leaving with the same realization that survival was possible if you understood the land. Sorella did not become loud. She did not become proud. She remained focused, teaching what she had learned, showing how to shape earth, how to build walls, how to trap heat, how to endure. Her small shelter became many shelters, then a scattered community, then something resembling a village. Not built by wealth, not built by power, but built by resilience. And every structure carried the same truth. Warmth could be created from nothing. Years later, when the winters came, people no longer feared them. The land still froze, the wind still howled, but beneath, the surface beneath, layers of earth and effort, life continued quietly, steadily, unbroken. And at the center of it all was the girl who had once been thrown out at 16, who had stood alone in the cold with nothing, and chosen not to disappear. Sorella never returned to the house that had rejected her. She did not need to, because she had built something greater than a home. She had built proof that even in the coldest, darkest moments, when everything is taken, when no one believes in you, when the world turns its back, you can still create warmth. You can still build something that lasts. And sometimes the strongest foundations are made not from what you are given, but from what you refuse to lose.